Following a comprehensive 7-month investigation into allegations made in a documentary by Al Jazeera America, the NFL found no credible evidence that Peyton Manning was provided with or used HGH or other substances prohibited by the league's policy on performance-enhancing substances. It was announced today. Now, the league still plans to interview Julius Peppers, Clay Matthews, Mike Neal, and James Harrison, who were also mentioned in an Al Jazeera report linking players to performance-enhancing drugs. Stephen A., what's your reaction?
Well, my reaction is I'm not surprised, and let's not walk around with wool over our eyes. If the league could find any way to not bring any unwanted or negative attention in the direction of Peyton Manning, why would they not? With that being said, I'm guilty of it too. I don't want Peyton Manning sullied in any way. Peyton Manning is a literal pillar of the community, of the NFL community. He's been a great ambassador for the game of football for nearly 2 decades. He's a 2-time Super Bowl champion. He is absolutely positively class personified with all who have dealt with him over the years. And so when you heard these reports come out last January from Al Jazeera linking him to PED use, especially when it also intimated that something was sent to his wife, not him, and now you're bringing the wife into the equation, and it gives people reason to think about Roger Clemens and his wife when she was on the cover of Sports Illustrated. You don't want something like that for Peyton Manning. Peyton Manning has meant too much to the game of football. He's conducted himself in a very pristine manner, the quintessential role model as a professional athlete. And so you look at it from that perspective, and the fact that he's going to still be attached to football in some way, working for some network, whether it's us or somebody else, talking about the game of football if he so chooses. That's just something that you don't want attached to somebody like him. He deserves better. His reputation, his performance on the field, his commitment to excellence has warranted better. That doesn't mean you absolve him from any guilt if indeed he is guilty of something, but you don't have to apologize for really and sincerely hoping that there's nothing attached to him. Let's face reality. James Harrison has been accused in this to some degree. I respect the hell out of James Harrison, but I'm here to tell you, he ain't going to garner the sympathy, the empathy, the level of sensitivity that Peyton Manning would. Clay Matthews, same thing. Both of them were interviewed by the NFL. The NFL is investigating matter, going through laboratory tests, all of this other stuff. They're not going to garner the same level of empathy. You don't find yourself, vehemently rooting for their innocence the way that you did with Peyton Manning, because you did find yourself saying, damn, if Peyton Manning is guilty of this, I mean, who the hell is next? Derek Jeter? Who is safe if Peyton Manning is guilty? So the fact that you heard the news that he's basically been exonerated to some degree, and to a large degree anyway, and it's all passé, is a beautiful, beautiful thing, and I'm happy to hear the news.
My first reaction to it when he was accused is, well, if that's Peyton Manning on PEDs, I hope it's not true. I mean, he was terrible. He had no arm. Right. If that's Peyton Manning on PEDs, what was he, passed away without them? It didn't make sense to me. Right. Peyton Manning, of course, we're more invested in his story than we are in the stories of players like James Harrison or Clay Matthews. When their names get attached to it, we go, maybe, I don't know. You know those characters, you root for them.
I hope they're innocent, too.
Of course.
I like both of them.
It's not that you don't root for them, but you're simply not as invested in them. We sell sport. What we do here on ESPN, really better than anyone, is we sell sport through narrative, through story. And in order to have an interesting story, you need strong and interesting characters. You need obstacles for them to overcome, right? That big obstacles. The more interesting the character and the bigger the obstacle, the more interesting the story, the more compelling. And Peyton Manning here was the best quarterback. Let me rephrase. He was the best player in the history of the NFL during the regular season.
Yeah.
He's the best regular season player ever, who simply got much worse than his normal standard under pressure in the playoffs. There's no way around that. You don't root for that to happen, but that's the way it was. And finally, at the end of his career, when maybe partly because of a sense that he didn't have the arm anymore, not that he ever had, like, the top-flight arm.
He never did.
But the fact that he didn't have to do too much, maybe, helped him emotionally, psychologically, under pressure, just take his foot off the pedal a little bit, let his defense, a lot of quarterbacks throughout history who were playing kind of around the level Peyton was playing this year could ride a good defense pretty far into the playoffs. And he became that kind of player, and you felt good for him because he'd now won a championship when he was at his best, and then he also won it when he was no longer at his best, and he did it with guile, and he did it by trusting his defense and his teammates. And you would hate for the story to end with this interesting character and these obstacles that he overcame, the choking, and, you know, you would hate for the story to end instead of with the Super Bowl with, oh, and it turns out that he was cheating the whole time. Yep. So, of course, given the level of investment that we have in him, people who follow football, of course, it's great that he seems to be exonerated here. It's what you're rooting for the whole time, and it's a relief.
It is a relief, especially, and you're absolutely right, because he wasn't impressive at all. Last year was his worst year. We all know that. We all know that the Carolina Panthers, Denver's defense showed up and won that Super Bowl for them. Let's just call it what it is. But it doesn't take away from what Peyton Manning has meant to the game, and we understand that. I will tell you, though, that while it was going on, here's what I didn't mind, and I don't mean this as negatively as it would sound, because I'm certainly not pointing the finger at Peyton Manning in any way. But when situations, when individuals like Peyton Manning find themselves in these precarious kind of situations, it highlights the discrepancy that exists between him and other players. Like, if it were somebody else, would you have had that attitude? No. If it was somebody else, would there have been a presumption of innocence attached to them? If it was somebody else, would we have been so willing to sit up there? Or would we be so willing right now to sit here today and say, oh, that's a pass?
First family of football.
It's no big deal. I mean, because think about that. Remember, that wasn't the only story that Peyton Manning was associated with. Remember, University of Tennessee, even though that case is now beyond all of us, some of the things that he was accused of. Now, clearly, he was just a college student, a college quarterback, and all of that stuff, not to excuse the allegations that were leveled against him. But you had people that found it hard to believe that. Whereas with others, even those who don't have records, even those who don't have a recorded history of transgressions, there's still an elevated level of guilt that is attached to them because they haven't successfully gone about the business of ingratiating themselves with us. So in Peyton Manning's case,
what kind of an emotional investment have we made in you? We don't want all that to be in vain. Right. In Peyton's case, we don't want it to be in vain, particularly when you feel like he's been marketed as one of the good guys.
Of course, put him on a pedestal.
But who is it that allows them to ingratiate? Who is it that allows them to ingratiate themselves with Joe Public? And why do we do that? We do it for Peyton Manning. How many other guys do we do it for? How about the NFL players that sit out there and look at him and say, why y'all giving him a pass? Why y'all light on him? If it were us, you'd come at us differently.
He's been around for 100 years at a very high level. Right. He's been on commercials. He's been in our living room. And this is human nature. Human nature is such. You can hear about a terrible thing happening far away and just the number of people that it affects. And that will not affect you emotionally the same way as something bad happens to someone you know.
Yep.
Even though in some kind of sense, in a larger moral sense, it's worse what happened far away. Yep. You don't experience it the same way. All these other players in the NFL, many of them, even though they are of varying importance, they feel to us like they're interchangeable. And there are some who we feel like we know, and Peyton's one of those guys.
Gotcha.
Let's not forget the family it comes from as well. We know all his brothers, even Cooper.
And his dad, yes.
Yes, of course. Up